Whether you are looking to build a new career or kickstart that new idea that you've got,
Microsoft Reactor connects you with the developers and startups that share your goals.
Learn new skills, meet new peers, and discover the latest in technology.
Events are running around the clock, so join us anytime, anywhere.
Reactors are communities to connect. We want you to meet real developers and entrepreneurs just like you. Here you can get skilled up and learn from our product experts in the Microsoft Cloud and in open source. So watch us on demand and share your own perspective as we live stream in communities all around the world.
Hello everyone, good evening to you all. Thank you for joining us today at Microsoft Reactor Bengaluru. I am Parth Varu, Event Program Manager for Microsoft Reactor. Hope you all are doing good. So let's begin. So before we begin, please go through our code of conduct. We are all here to learn together. So please be respectful of other people's views and understandings. Please drop all your questions in a chat section. We'll pick it up from there. Now I would like to bring in Samir, who is the speaker for our today's session. Hey, hi Samir, how are you?
Hi, hey everyone. Hi Parth, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good,
so you're
good,
joining
good.
live from Hyderabad?
I am, yes, I am based in Hyderabad.
Oh, that's nice. Good to know. So how's biryani days going on?
Well, all days are biryani days here, so yeah, it's pretty.
Okay.
I'm a biryani fan, so yeah, I enjoy biryani.
Okay. So everyone, just to give you a context about Samir. Samir is experienced with various verticals of companies, small and large. He is interested in things technical, semi-technical, and non-technical. His skill sets includes SCOM, Azure Monitor, and Azure Hybrid Cloud. He is also a big community person and founder and organizer of Experts Live India. Wow, good to know. He is also host a podcast under a same banner. For all the things interesting, he has been awarded Azure Community Hero. Congratulations, Samir. And Azure
Thank
Content
you so much.
Hero badges by Microsoft. Over to Samir to begin the session. Over to you. All yours.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Parth. Hi everyone again. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Let me see if I can share my screen. Well, share my right screen, that is. Okay, that is the one I want to share. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep.
You see the slide deck, right?
Yes, I can see the deck.
Awesome. Let's get started then. So my name is Samir, as Parth has already very warmly introduced me. Currently, I worked as a hybrid consultant at a small Dutch company called Topcore. That is my LinkedIn QR code. So if you want to connect with me, please feel free to scan it. Should take you directly to my LinkedIn profile. I won't waste a lot of time on my introduction because Parth has already done that. So he's given all the major achievements of my life. So let's just get started. This is what we are going through today. Basically, this is a brief summary of these topics. Before we get into the main menu of today, which is AKS on Azure Stack HCI, I think it is only evident that we have to get some background, right? So why should we care about Azure Stack HCI to begin with? What is Azure Stack HCI? What is Azure Arc? Why is this seemingly all of a sudden, why is everything, revolving around Azure Stack HCI or Azure Arc or the whole hybrid story of the data center today, right? So we should go through the background real quick as to just set up the stage as to why we should care about running AKS on HCI. Since this is AKS on Azure Stack HCI, I am assuming a little bit of AKS knowledge. It doesn't have to be super deep. You just have to understand what AKS is, or at least what Kubernetes is at its basic, and what are the basic components of Kubernetes, right? So I will be leaning a little bit on assuming that you have that, or at least you have heard of some of the concepts. So why should we care about hybrid clouds today? So why is this sudden rise in hybrid cloud story? We are in the age of digital transformation, right? So you don't need me to tell you that. Everything is being digital nowadays. That includes the core applications, that also includes the edge location, that also includes the endpoints, right? So every organization today is rethinking how they engage with their customers. So you just like 4 or 5 years ago, we were dealing cash. Today we are dealing with Paytm. We are dealing in QR codes essentially, right? So every organization is rethinking how should I make my business or my service more engageable, or what should I do to keep up with the with the future, the modern times. How do I improve the experience that my employees are having when they are working on some particular technology, or they're working on some service that I'm providing? How do I continuously improve that experience, right? So there are, as part of it, new demands are coming from the developers, because you see there's explosion of big new technologies nowadays. Containerization is just one of them, but there are many AI, ML, IoT applications coming in. There is a chat box, AI chat box. I don't know if you have heard of it, Chat GPT, that is rocking the social media nowadays. So there are new requirements that are coming in from the developers, and also from the consumers, that are the users. As a user, I want to be at the top of everything. I want the latest and greatest of all the technology at the at the touch of my finger. So where does this innovation come from? Where does this technology come from, right? So this is all part of the digital transformation. As part of it, again, every corner of the business is being impacted. Does not matter what kind of company you are, does not matter if you are a financial company, does not matter if you are a banking company, insurance company, a medical company, right? It does not matter if you are a sporting company even, or if you are, let's say, a retail company, right? With probably hundreds of shops across the country or across the globe. All of this is being impacted by this. So does not matter what is your core business, it is still powered in the background by IT. Right? So there is some IT running probably on-prem, or it could also be running on Azure. Well, public cloud, but since we are all Microsoft people mostly here, so it could be running on Azure, or it could be running on-prem, or it could be running on multiple locations. That does not matter. But ultimately, all your business services are reliant on the IT backbone of your company. And IT environments are being more complex. When I say complex, I mean new services, new technologies are coming in. Like I just mentioned, like there's some IoT, new IoT devices, the new AI capabilities coming in. There's like multitude of hosting platforms that you can actually put, host your applications today. It is not like you have a server on your data center, you install an application on your data center, and then you distribute that application. It is not all of that all the time anymore, right? So there are serverless computing, right? So there is Azure Functions, there is app services. So all of these things, there's containerization, right? So all of these things are basically changing the way that we consume our applications. It's changing the way how we host our IT estate today. And all of these challenges must be resolved with limited human interaction. And when I say that, what I mean is, yes, automation is part of it. Automation not only reduces the chance for error, it also increases efficiency, right? Because automation basically can run nonstop. It can run without being tired, as opposed to humans, right? And it is less prone to making errors. That is why these challenges must be resolved with limited human interaction. I'm not saying we have to eliminate the human component altogether, because that is simply not possible, at least in my humble opinion. Human intellect has to go somewhere, but we are changing where at which level the human intellect interacts with the machine. So customer environments are evolving to keep up with these modern times. And IT is increasingly playing a strategic role. So again, like I said, does not matter what is your core business. Every company today, if you think about it, right? Every company today is an IT company in some matter, right? Because all of this is running on VMs. It could be running on databases. It could be running on containerization, right? Or it could be running on some serverless computing services today. Yes, you are giving, let's say, a net banking experience to your customer, but where is that net banking hosted or let's say, installed? It is installed on your VMs or containers. So all of these applications, like there's an explosion of applications. Again, like I said, it is giving us more and more control or giving us more and more convenience when it comes to deploying and maintaining your applications. And as part of this is not only a software digital transformation, it is also a hardware digital transformation. It's also underlying IT infrastructure transformation as well, right? So it is no longer that you only have a big core data center and then you're providing services out of that. You are moving to cloud, right? So we are moving to public cloud. We are also moving to multiple clouds, right? So here on the top, on the far right, you see there are a lot of companies. I think around 90%, I think, if the number is not wrong, of 90% of companies have some element of multi-cloud going on in their IT strategy. So it's not only about only moving to public cloud or lifting and shifting everything that you have currently in private cloud to public cloud. It is also about distributing your workloads, right? Because there are some companies that don't want to be locked in to a particular cloud service provider, like let's say Microsoft or AWS. So that is why they keep some workloads here. They use the most mature service on one of the clouds, the most mature service on some other cloud, right? And then they integrate together, which makes IT a little complex. But as we will talk about in some of the topics today, there are ways to kind of bring everything together and still able to manage everything from the single pane of glass. There's also diverse infrastructure, right? So the data is not only coming from the core data centers or the core locations, it is also coming from the edge locations, right? And when I say edge locations, what I mean by that is, let's take an example of a retail company. Let's say Reliance. They have branch offices, or they have stores. Let's say they have stores every corner of the cities nowadays, right? So there's tremendous amount of data that is being generated on this edge locations. So where does that go? Do you send all that data in real time to your core data center, or do you send it to your public cloud and then process it there and bring it back? Just imagine how much latency, just imagine how much waiting that would involve, right? So you don't want to wait for 10 minutes just to build 10 of your items. Nope, you just get it done within 2-5 minutes and off you go, right? So this data has to be processed where it is generated. Now this is a very mellow example, let's say I gave you, but think of this in a very critical scenario, something like data mining, or say something like medical applications where data has to be very precise and it has to have near zero latency, right? So that is why you have to process that data where it is generated. And that is why a tremendous amount of data is being generated at the edge locations as well. And if you really think about it, cloud is not a place anymore, right? Just give it a thought. If you think of cloud, what do you think? Do you think of public clouds? Do you think of the convenience? Do you think that, okay, whatever I was running on my servers or on my own premises, now Microsoft is running for me? Well, yes, that is not inaccurate. That is true. But we have very quickly realized in the recent times that, okay, it is not always feasible to lift and shift everything to cloud. there could be some reasons that are restraining you from making this move, at least partially, right? So there can be some workloads that you can just blindly move to public cloud without thinking about it. But there are some workloads that you can't. Think of data gravity issues, like I just said, where data latency is very, very critical. Or think of compliance, right? So if you're think of GDPR, think of HIPAA guidelines, that where you cannot send the data of your customers or the data of your patients. If you're working in a medical industry, you cannot send that data outside of your boundary of authority, let's say, right? Or for India, the data related to the citizens of India cannot leave the boundaries of India, right? That is one of the compliance that all the IT has to abide with today. So it's not always feasible to send your data outside of your own data center. You want to have control. You want to have your own, let's say, end-to-end process on how you work with that data or how you archive that data, right? But should that mean that, okay, I have to keep all my data on-prem, but do I have to keep sticking to my old tools and technologies? Does that mean if I'm not running anything on public, does that mean that I have to work with primitive tools on my data center? Absolutely not. You can still use the services that the public cloud provides still while being on your data on-premise data center. How? We'll take a look at that in a minute. So just as the tagline, cloud is not a place. Cloud is more of a concept. It's more of a process, let's say, that wherever you go, wherever the data resides, we still want to treat it with convenience, of course, right? Because the convenience of using public services has kind of spoiled us a little bit. So we want, at least it has spoiled me for sure, because I want everything to work like cloud. I want everything to look like cloud, right? And I want everything to be as easy to develop, maintain, and troubleshoot as it is on the cloud. So as part of this, Microsoft actually, so this is the hybrid cloud story, right? So you have data on-prem, you have data on the public clouds, but you also don't want to miss out all the goodness of public cloud. So you make that connection between your private to your public and connect that data together, or connect that connect those two places together, let's say. And that is where the true hybrid capabilities come in. So as part of that strategy, Microsoft offers us three offers, or three products: Azure Stack Hub, Azure Stack HCI, and Azure Stack Edge. All of this, take a note here that all of this is powered by Azure Arc. You see the Microsoft Azure cloud there. It is literally connected with all of these products with Azure Arc. So what is Azure Arc? Again, I have the next slide is actually dedicated to Azure Arc. So let's talk about Azure Arc more then. So what is the difference between these three products? Seemingly, if you're reading the description, they kind of sound alike, but they are very different. There's some very nuanced and important differences between them. I will keep Hub and Edge very brief, and we'll dive deeper into Azure Stack HCI, of course. Azure Stack Hub is when you want to use the familiar data services or PaaS services or even IaaS services exactly as you would in the public cloud, right? So you basically bring the piece. Think of, let's say this is public Azure. This is your data center. What you do is just slash a little piece of public cloud, bring it to your on-prem. That is essentially exactly what you're doing here. Right? So this private cloud, this Azure Stack Hub, works exactly the same way as the public cloud. Works, right? It has all the same SKUs, it has all the same constructs and everything. Then you've got Azure Stack Edge. Again, if this is confusing you at this point, it's okay. It's not at the focus of this discussion. So just giving you a brief introduction there. Azure Stack Edge, again, is a little more specialized in its use. It is mainly used for edge computing for Azure ML IoT services, or GPU heavy services at the edge. That is where Azure Stack Edge is mostly used. And there's this Azure Stack HCI, probably the most relatable product for most organizations today, because you still have your own infrastructure, your own data center, but you are just making that, let's say, thin connection to Azure, public Azure, and bringing all the goodness of the public cloud to your on-prem. So let's take a quick look at what Azure Arc is. Azure Arc is basically a glue that makes everything stick with each other, right? So when I say everything, what I mean is workloads running in the public cloud, in Azure, let's say in particular, workloads running on your data center, or workloads running on non-Azure public clouds as well, right? It could be your VM could be running on AWS or GCP. You can still project an instance of that VM onto your public Azure and still use the same constructs as you would use for any local Azure resource, right? So you can still leverage that ARM, resource manager construct to all of this non-Azure resources as well. Again, it will, if you're not very familiar with how this feels and looks and feels, we will be able to see that in a demo real quick. So this is Azure Arc. Basically, it is a piece of software that you install on your non-Azure resources, and it projects the instance into public Azure. So it not only brings your on-prem resources to public Azure, it also brings Azure public services to your data center as well. So it works in both ways, right? So you see here, let's start from, let's say, the bottom. Right, so you've got all these on-premise IT infrastructure resources. Now, this could be anything. This could be servers, this could be databases, or your AKS clusters, or Kubernetes clusters, that is. You can still project them into public Azure, regardless of where this is sitting, right? So this is actually sitting on, if you see at the bottommost text here, it is sitting on Azure Stack HCI, or it could also be sitting on a VMware virtualization platform. Does not matter where it is sitting. You can still project it into Azure. Or you can also bring what we call Azure Arc-enabled services back to your data center. Right? So all of this goodness of app services, data services like SQL managed instance, let's say, or PostgreSQL, or Azure Functions, think of app services, think of Azure Monitor, Azure Policy, Backup, ASR, site recovery, right? All of these things you can bring down to your data center on your premise as well, which will be under your control, right? How amazing that is. Again, as part of this, this will be treated as Azure native Azure resource, and you will be able to manage it as such. So then what is Azure Stack HCI? Very quickly, a very simple definition here is that it is just an operating system, right? If you really think about it, it is, yes, it starts from the hardware level, but if you go to purchase Azure Stack HCI, you can't just purchase the Azure Stack HCI operating system. You have to purchase it from the hardware. You have to go for an integrated hardware or a validated hardware. Now that is a discussion for another session maybe, but it starts from the hardware. On top of it, you've got, depending on whether you go for integrated or validated, it may or may not come pre-installed. On an integrated system, Azure Stack HCI operating system will come pre-installed. So it comes pre-installed on it, and on top of it, you run your virtualization layer. On top of it, you run your containerization, right? So it is just enterprise. It is, just think of it as a stripped down version of Windows Server. Very similar. Technically, it is born from, let's say, Windows Server, but there are differences. The main one being that Windows Server is the guest operating system. It is best hosted as the guest, while Azure Stack HCI operating system is the virtualization layer only, right? It does not do anything more. And you cannot install roles and features on Azure Stack HCI, right? Because it is just a bare metal virtualization layer. Again, it also uses the same technologies, so it is nothing new. Azure Stack HCI may as a product may be relatively new, but the underlying technologies that it makes use of is not new at all, right? So for for virtualization, it still uses the very familiar Hyper-V, right? So if you are a Windows admin or have been for a few years, you know everything about Hyper-V. S2D, again, this is S2D is not new. It is software-defined storage. It is just a virtual, let's say, from a variety of disks, from a collection of disks, it just pools all that storage and presents that storage as a software-defined storage to all the workloads that you're running on top of it. And then there's SDN as well, right? Software-defined networking. So they call it Azure-inspired because it is very similar to how that works on on public Azure. Now, one good thing about Azure Stack HCI operating system is that it has stretch clustering by default, right? Again, this is we are going to talk about AKS today, so I'm not going to dive too deep into any of these concepts, but just to give you a quick overview, stretch cluster is basically where you can have multiple sites, primary site and a secondary site, and you can have replication going on between them. Now, all of this is hybrid by design. Again, like I said, it uses the same. Azure Stack HCI is actually a first-class resource in Azure. What that means is it recognizes Azure Stack HCI as if it was Azure's local or native resource. So all of the Azure Resource Manager templates, so like I said, they're actually applicable to all of these Azure Stack HCI clusters. Since it is built on your subscription and it is managed by released by Microsoft, let's say, so that is always up to date, right? So all the new features will be made available to you over the air. And again, so there will be native integration with Azure services. It is very tightly coupled with public Azure, so it has this native integration where you don't really have to go install additional agents to make use of any other native resources, native services. So how do you manage this? Again, management is also very familiar. If you've been a Windows admin or have been working with Windows servers, you know PowerShell, you know Windows Admin Center, right? So you know System Center tools, you know virtual machine managers. You can use SCOM to monitor these things, monitor VMs on this Azure Stack HCI. You can use Configuration Manager, SCCM, to patch these machines and so on, right? So all of these are very familiar tools. So this is the architecture. Again, like I said, from the bottom, it has hardware ecosystem. Now Dell is one of the hardware vendors. You can go, there are a bunch of others. I'll probably drop a link later for the catalog where you can browse all the integrated and validated vendors that provide you this infrastructure. Then on top of it, since it is an integrated system from Dell, they actually, Azure Stack HCI comes pre-installed on this hardware, right? So as you get the servers, you also get Azure Stack HCI installed on it. Now there are two parts. You can go you can go both ways, but there are two ways to go from here. So you can install or spin up virtual machines and then migrate your data lift and shift. You can run anything. So from this point on, it is just a normal virtualization layer. So you install virtual machines. On top of it, you install Windows operating system or Linux, and then on top of it, of course, you install your applications, or you go the AKS route where you install an AKS instance on this Azure Stack HCI hardware, and then making use of that, you can deploy your applications with containers. The fun thing about this is you can actually multi-use this AKS instance. Azure App Services like SQL MI and all, you can also make use of them using, if you have an AKS instance installed. Again, there is the demo in the upcoming slides, so we'll talk more about that then. So I will assume that you have some basic understanding of what Kubernetes is, because that is, even I do, because I don't have to work a lot with Kubernetes, but I have basic, This just goes on to, I'm giving you this disclaimer because this just goes on to show you that how easy it is, even for a non-Kubernetes developer person or an admin like you and me, to spin up an Azure AKS instance on Azure Stack HCI. Just a little bit about AKS on Azure. Kubernetes on Azure is, you know how Kubernetes works. It has core components like API server, it has etcd, it has a load balancer, right? These components make up the core infrastructure, and then you've got worker nodes where you actually have the workloads running. Now, these are, at the end of the day, virtual machines, but then you are using containerization on top of it to host your applications, to distribute your applications or whatnot. Now, what AKS does, so let's think of a traditional Kubernetes deployment. You are a Kubernetes admin. You have deployed your Kubernetes cluster. Now you are responsible for all these core components that we talked about, right? So you are responsible for maintaining this core infrastructure. What Azure Stack HCI, what AKS does is it abstracts that layer away from you, right? So that layer of core components is taken up by Microsoft instead. So they will manage your core system services, and you can just simply start working on the worker nodes themselves. So you just spin up the worker nodes, and then you install your AKS cluster on top of it and make use of that. Now, Kubernetes has been around for a while now, so even AKS, Microsoft has been learning from the real world experience, the field experience of what Kubernetes, what best practices for Kubernetes should be, and these are all baked into when you're using AKS on the public cloud. It also has multi-layer security. Now, gone are the days when people think that, oh, it's in cloud, so that must be insecure, right? So that is not the case anymore. So all of these components, starting from the storage, data layer, networking layer, compute layer, all of these layers are hardened. So what basically means that they are very well secured and well tested against vulnerabilities. Now, AKS is also class 1. It is actually one of the most popular and fastest growing services in public Azure. So the enterprise support is also top notch, obviously, as you would expect from Microsoft and Kubernetes, right? So there are not only there's not a community of experts, but there's also enterprise official support from Microsoft, where there are Kubernetes experts and AKS experts that will basically address all the queries you have. And then there's also unified management. So you have, like I said, does not matter where your resources are being hosted, you can still manage it from a single pane of glass using Azure Arc. So how does this translate to AKS on Azure Stack HCI? Now, finally, we have come to the topic at hand, let's say. But again, all of this previous background was necessary to set up the stage and tell you why Azure Stack HCI is a big deal, and AKS on Azure Stack HCI is even bigger deal nowadays, especially, right? So this is all the goodness of this that I just told you. AKS on public cloud is also here on AKS on Azure Stack HCI. Now remember, Azure Stack HCI is sitting on your premise. You have control of the hardware. This is not hosted on public Azure, right? Keep that in mind always if you're not familiar with how Azure Stack HCI works. So all of this, again, this is familiar Kubernetes application platform. It is hybrid by design. So it is AKS consistent Kubernetes cluster management. So all the experience that you get in the public cloud portal, you still get the same even on Azure Stack HCI. Right? So if you are already invested in AKS and you have some applications running on-prem, why should you miss out on modernizing those applications as well, right? How cool is that? So you can have that consistent management experience and development experience across both of your platforms. Deployment of AKS on HCI is really easy. We have a demo. It should take around 20 minutes to deploy this AKS service on Azure Stack HCI. It's very easy. It's a straightforward wizard that you go through if you're using Windows Admin Center, or you can also automate that using PowerShell. And all of this has built-in Azure Arc capabilities. Like I said, it is very tightly integrated. So all the experience, all the improvements, all the features that you get in public cloud, you also get that in private, in your hybrid cloud. Now this AKS on Azure Stack HCI also can run Windows and Linux. So in case of Linux, it is the Mariner OS from Microsoft and the Windows operating system, of course. So this is the best platform for modernizing your applications, right? So when you go about upgrading your application, or you go about lifting and shifting, you have options now, right? So if you cannot move to cloud for whatever reasons, you can still stay on-prem and still achieve this application modernization that you're looking. And all of this is local administration with Windows Admin Center. Now there are two ways, actually. If you remember that slide, let me see if I can quickly pull that up. This one, right? So on the left and right, you see here, on the right, there is Azure Arc for cloud management. So all of this you can manage from the public Azure cloud, or you can also manage it centrally on-premise with Windows Admin Center. And so there you have options. You can locally manage all of this Kubernetes estate locally from your Windows Admin Center instance. Again, security has not been compromised, obviously, because just because it is not, let's say, actual AKS. This AKS on Azure Stack HCI does not mean there is any compromise on built-in security. It is very secure and a trusted hardened platform, right from all the layers, compute, storage, and networking. And this also integrates, by the way, using Azure Arc. This also integrates with services like Azure, like Defender on the cloud, right? So you have threat protection, analysis, threat analysis, and vulnerability assessments and all. So now let's zoom in on the right side of that architecture diagram we just saw. AKS on Azure Stack HCI in particular. So this is how it looks like on a high level, right? So when you install AKS on Azure Stack HCI, you install it in two phases. So one is installing the Azure Kubernetes service. It is also called as a management cluster or platform services. What you do here is basically you are installing that core components, right? So if you're installing that system services, you deploy one VM currently. There are plans to expand those if you want. So you have one VM that runs all the system services, let's say the core libraries that are required to run your control plane and worker nodes, which is a separate deployment again. Then once you have done that, again, it takes 15-20 minutes at most, given that you have satisfied all the prerequisites. And then you create a Kubernetes cluster. Again, there are two parts to it. One is the control plane, where all of your core components go, like the API server or the etcd database or the load balancer, right? So this is where all the core components go. And then you also have some additional worker nodes. Now this can be Linux VM, or it can also be Windows VM. This is where your application will sit. Everything left from here is for the system services. On the right, you see if you are using Azure Arc, if you choose to use Azure Arc, now this is optional. You don't have to use it. If you want to just keep everything on-prem, you can still use it. But of course, it is recommended. After all, the reason that you are using Azure Stack HCI, one of the big reasons is that you want to have that goodness of cloud services. So if you are using those, you can make use of all of these services that you see on the right here. Right. So enough talking. There are no questions. Let's get straight into the demo. Again, like I said, there are three components to deploying this AKS service on your premise. That is, first is deploying AKS service itself, the management cluster, right? Now this is a pre-recorded video, so I will talk through it and pause if and as required. I just want you to take a moment to take a look at this prerequisites. You need I'll be really straightforward here. You need a beefy machine to run AKS service if you want to run it properly, right? So you need to have those resources. Not that you will have that problem. This will you'll probably run into some capacity issues only if you are testing it in labs. But when you actually purchase the solution, the hardware you have will be beefy, depending on what you choose, obviously. But it will have the capacity to run Azure Stack HCI comfortably. Sorry, AKS on Azure Stack HCI comfortably. But just take a look at what the prerequisites entail. And I'll just play this video here real quick. So this is just checking the system requirements, installing some PowerShell modules here that are required on each of the hosts. So this is a distributed application, this is distributed deployment, by the way, right? So the spins that virtual machines that it spins in the background will be distributed for whatever amount of nodes that you have in the cluster. So just checking prerequisites again. So you have to review if you want, you can expand this. I think it goes ahead and expands it. Yeah. So you've got available memory check, virtual switch that has to be internet facing. All these things are very well detailed in the documentation. So I won't go through each and every box and take here, but you get the idea. So CRED SSP, again, this is required for passing your credentials from Windows Admin Center to your target servers. Now you see here, this is the management cluster. And the VM, so the VM image that you install on this management system. Now this is the load balancer again. So this is the IP range where your workloads will sit, your actual end user workloads. This is so keep this IP address in mind. It is .150 and .250. It will come into play later. Now since it is connected to Azure, it is asking us for an Azure subscription. Now you need to be the owner of Azure subscription to be able to deploy this. Now so just reviewing again, so this is DHCP. You can have DHCP or static IP addresses. I'm going with DHCP because it is the easiest, but you can also go with static if you want to. Now so it'll just take a few minutes, and that is successfully applied. Now on the next, and just creating management cluster actually. It just takes around 15 or 20 minutes at max. So this setup has taken us 18 minutes, almost 19 minutes. Now at this point, you have installed the management cluster, right? So you are now ready to move on to the control plane now. Let's go to the next slide. So this one's deploying the AKS cluster itself, right? So again, let me very quickly jump back to the diagram. This one, right? So we have finished the first part of it. We have installed the management cluster. Now what we're going to do is install the Kubernetes cluster. Now again, it has two parts to it. One will be the control plane used for the core components, and then you've got the actual worker nodes. All right, so let's start with this. Again, just take a look at what the prerequisites are. Azure Arc integration, again, it is optional. Like I said, you can connect or you can choose to keep it isolated from Azure as well. That is fine. Again, my recommendation obviously would be to enable it if you can, because that is where all the goodness of Azure comes down to your on-premise. Just using up the username and password. Kubernetes cluster name. At this point, actually, let me pause this a little bit. At this point, you can go to Windows Admin Center. And if you go to virtual machines, you will see that there are a bunch of virtual machines created, one for the control plane and one for the management server, management cluster, right? Now, in an ideal AKS on public Azure scenario, that would be abstracted from you. This portion will be abstracted from you because Azure takes care of it. But since this is your cluster, since this is your infrastructure, all of this is in your control, right? So all of this has to sit somewhere. So it sits on your own Azure Stack HCI nodes. And again, if you noticed this already, on the left side, this is Windows Admin Center, by the way, right? So if you haven't seen it before, this is Windows Admin Center. Looks very much like the Azure portal, and I love it for that. You see on the left, there's Azure Kubernetes Service is natively available on Windows Admin Center, right? So you don't have to keep changing the wizards from on-prem to cloud and then on-prem, right? So all of this is baked right into the Windows Admin Center purview, right? It's very convenient and very efficient. And so this is the primary node pool that we just created. That was for the actual control plane. And now this is where we are creating the worker nodes. This is the pool where your applications will be hosted on. So I'm just creating one for Linux, one for Windows. It's exactly the same. You choose the OS type, you choose the node size. There are some node sizes available depending on how beefy you want it to be. You can choose the right size. Now you can optionally have Active Directory integrated. I'll keep it disabled to keep it simple for now. You can choose from network configuration. So this is using the CNI component, right? You have got Flannel or Calico plugins. Essentially, you can use either one of them. And just now done. This is where we have now created a working Azure AKS cluster on your Azure Stack HCI. You see it has now appeared on the bottom here, AKS cluster. Now if you open that, it will take you directly to portal.azure.com. And you see here on the left, I'll just again pause this. This video is almost over anyway. But I'll pause this here. Let me go back. I'll pause this here, right? So here on the left, you can see this has automatically appeared. Now, did we do anything in the Azure portal to make it appear in the portal? Not at all. This is automatically using the power of Azure Arc. You see here, Kubernetes Azure Arc. So this Kubernetes cluster is now automatically Azure Arc enabled. So you see on the left, there are all the familiar Azure constructs that you see in the public portal as well. So there are namespaces, workload, services, ingresses, storage, configuration. And this is in preview as of now, but it will, of course, go live. But you can still make use of this today. Now, how powerful is this? Just imagine, right? So because now you have a cluster, a working cluster that is sitting on your premise, that is under your control, but you can still use it alongside the other AKS native cloud AKS clusters, just exactly the same way. So you don't have to differentiate whether they are sitting. It does not matter where they are sitting. Does not make any difference to you. This is if you have been doing maintenance and managing AKS clusters in production. I'm sure you're appreciating how easy and how powerful this is. Now, one last thing that I wanted to show you is the GitOps integration. So you see here on the screen, it says enable GitOps integration. So I'm sure you're familiar what GitOps is. If not, then I'll just very quickly give you an overview. GitOps is basically the source control for your applications. You can published and maintained by GitLabs. So it's in the video, it's just showing that on the left you have all the monitoring capabilities as well. So if you enable GitOps integration here, you can automate basically all of your deployments on scale. You can also configure Azure policies to keep all the clusters comply by the same Azure policy regardless of where they're sitting. But we are just going to go and quickly enable the GitOps integration. Okay, so that shouldn't take long. So now what you do here is you just add a configuration. So now you can have this configuration stored in a GitHub repository, for example, right? So this one's actually, this is going to go through the process.
Hey, Samir, you're sharing your screen. We aren't able to see it.
Oh, really?
Just now, yeah.
Interesting.
Some technical glitch, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Just give me a minute.
Yes, sure.
Okay. Do I have to go back?
No,
No, right?
it's loading. Yeah.
I mean, you haven't
You're
lost
up.
a lot of screen share. Okay.
No, no. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So never mind. So what I've just done is let me start this video from the beginning. So what I've done is I've just accessed that cluster in the portal, Azure Public Portal, and you see there's an enable GitOps integration button right here. All you have to do is click on that button, and it will take you to the wizard where you can specify or select your configuration file. Just go. So this is, like I was saying, this is something that is hosted, can be hosted on your public or private Git repository even, right? So you can pull the code right from there. And as you make changes, GitOps will detect those changes that, okay, something has changed in this configuration file, and then it will pull that configuration across all the nodes that are making use of that particular repository, right? So this is amazing when it comes to managing clusters or managing applications at scale. So this is just giving us a quick overview of, so see this one is just making use of a private GitHub repository. So just showing you all the options, instance name, namespaces, and such. So now that I have one configured here, let's open that. Okay, so you see I've got on the bottom, you see my repository URL. That is my GitHub. Matt, that is actually Matt McSpirit, my friend and former colleague. His GitHub repository. We've got a very simple application YAML file there. So just hello arg. It just displays a web page using this application file. Is just showing off all the options there, right? So you notice here, I told you to remember all that IP addresses that we gave. So this is 192.168.0.153. This is within that 150 and 250 range that we gave, right? So this is an application, a web application. Granted, is not much going on here, but it's a simple web application that is hosted on one of these worker nodes, right? So this is an awesome, this is an Azure GitOps demo. This is my repo. This is a public repo. This is my YAML file, as you can see. It's a very simple piece of code is going on there. Now what we are going to do is now we are going to change this message to something else, and you will see that this application will be updated basically in real time without any downtime at all. That is the power of Kubernetes, right? So you have these pods which are replicated multiple times depending on how your configuration is, and all of this. You see here kubectl get pods. So these are the pods that are running this application essentially, right? As you can go and match the numbers. Now what I will do is I'll just make a very small change, just add a word there, and I'll commit changes. Now, of course, this is source control here, so you don't, obviously in a production, you won't directly go and commit changes. There will be a review process. But here you see that the old pods are terminating, new pods are being generated, and this application is now automatically, quote unquote, being updated just like that. Right? So think of all the applications, think of, let's say, a variety of, let's say, 400 edge locations where you've got AKS application distributed. You have one single configuration file for all of them. The moment you change the configuration code, GitOps will detect and it will send it back to all the pods. They will catch the new code and display the new application version or whatever, right? So this is again version control. So if something goes wrong, something goes bad, you always have the ability to roll back to the previous version. That's how awesome is this. Otherwise, if you had multiple application instances on multiple locations, what you would have to do is you will have to individually go and upgrade those applications going to each edge location. Just imagine how long and how tedious that process is. Now I just want to close this off with some, I think we're at the top of the hour, just about 4 or 5 minutes left. So I'll just close this off with how the licensing and costs for this work. So now if you have been keeping up with Ignite, there have been some basically groundbreaking changes in licensing and cost on how you run Azure Stack HCI in general, which also includes AKS on HCI. So normally, what you would be paying for running your Azure Stack HCI is $10 per physical core per month, right? So remember, you get a physical hardware that you've got Azure Stack HCI installed on. So you don't really get billed for the OS itself, but you get billed for the underlying physical cores that your hardware is using or your cluster is using. Now there are some add-on workloads. Now from here on, you've got the basic bare metal virtualization layer. Now you have to install your guest VMs on top of it, right? So what you do is you've got two options here. If you're using Windows, you can bring your own license. So if you've got all the data center licenses, for example, already purchased, then you can activate the same on Azure Stack HCI. Or you can use this Windows Server subscription for guest operating systems. Again, there is a fee, $23.3 per physical core per month. Now, keep in mind, this is per physical core and per month. So this is billed against your subscription. So at the end of the day, you will have, end of the month, you will have that bill generated for you. If you're using both of these, then it will be $33.3 per physical core per month. Now, the interesting thing here is with the recent Ignite announcements, what Microsoft announced is that, hey, okay, we have been hearing a lot from customers saying that, you know what, I'm actually already very invested into Microsoft licensing or Microsoft Windows licensing in particular, and I don't want another layer of additional licensing just to run Azure Stack HCI while I already have have Windows licenses laying around. So that was the feedback that Microsoft was getting from a lot of customers. So what they did is they made an announcement. Okay, if you have a Windows Server data center license with software assurance, then we're going to waive off all the additional fee of running Azure Stack HCI. So in that case, Azure Stack HCI running Azure Stack HCI is essentially free. You only have to invest into the underlying hardware, and of course, if you're using any Azure Arc enabled data services such as Azure Monitor, for example, so if you're pumping a lot of data into Azure Monitor workspace, then yes, there will be some cost associated with pumping that data into the workspace. But other than that, for running everything natively, locally, Azure Stack HCI, there is no additional fee. And this also extends to AKS on HCI. Let me quickly go back to the architecture diagram one last time. So in this, what you get billed for is only the worker nodes. You don't get billed for the management cluster. So even there, you are using a virtual machine. Now in the cluster, you are deploying a control plane. There you are also using virtual machines, but these are not counted, right? So these are waived off. Only place or only VMs that you get billed for is the worker nodes, the actual worker nodes. And those are billed per virtual core. Go back to slide. So there's 80 cents per virtual core per day, right? So this is billed, again, this is billed monthly, depending on how many virtual cores that you actually have in your cluster. So this is how the licensing and costing works. You can try it yourself. So the Azure Stack HCI comes with 60-day free trial. You don't need physical servers to get running. You can install it in a nested virtual machine, or you can also install it on Azure. Again, it is a nested virtual machine, but it is deployed on Azure. Or there's actually this Azure Jumpstart HCI box that I was just talking about. This was also announced in Microsoft Ignite, where you it is actually very easy to deploy this. It's just a few clicks of deployment, and it will create a new virtual machine, a big jump box with all the nested virtualization and all the Azure Stack HCI components installed on it. Or there's MS Labs, which is a collection of scripts and scenarios by Jaromir, who was also my friend and ex-colleague. There's amazing collection of scenarios Jaromir has built over the years. So this works on, again, it can work on on-premise machine. It can also work on the Azure machine. All right, with that, I think I am just about done, and I think we are on time. Any questions on this so far? Parth, are you there?
Hey, hi. So we have a question from Vijay. He asked, like, where can we see the hardware specification of Azure Stack HCI product?
Sure. Let me just go grab that link for you. It is Azure Stack. It is a catalog. Azure Stack HCI catalog. Okay, I will drop that link there. Is there any other question in the meantime?
Yep. So again, Sandeep has a question. What is the difference between Azure Arc and Azure Stack?
Azure Arc and Azure Stack. Okay, so Azure Stack is basically the family of the products, while Azure Arc is a technology that makes Azure Stack work with hybrid cloud. Right. So if you again, I'm not sharing my screen now, am I? Okay. So I told you, right? I showed you that diagram where we have 3 products. That is the Azure Stack. You can Azure Stack Hub, Azure Stack Edge, and Azure Stack HCI. Now, all of this in the background is powered by Azure Arc. Azure Stack sits on your premise. Then there's public Azure, and that link that makes this connection between your on-prem data center to public cloud is through Azure Arc. Right? It's a piece of software that you install on your virtualization platform or your virtual machines, that is. And then once you install that Azure Arc agent, it is called, it will talk to the subscription that you have associated with it. So it is just a facilitator. Azure Arc is just a facilitator. It's a tool to make that communication happen. And Azure Stack is a family of products.
Okay. So any more questions? Please drop all your questions in the chat if you have any questions. Final call for the questions.
Yeah, I will drop that catalog link. I don't seem to have it bookmarked for some reason.
So meanwhile, will you drop? So I'm posting a link which can take your learning further and help you all to take your career to understand more about the today's session.
There it is, finally. Okay. Should I drop that in the chat then, Parth?
Yep.
All right, so that is the link. So here you can, there are some filters actually. You can go through, I told you about the integrated system versus validated system. There are differences between which ones you choose. And there is also a catalog or the specifications of all the different models involved, or all the options that you have to choose from. So there is a combination of AMD CPU. There is Intel. You can go with like different capacity of storage. You can go with like mirror accelerated parity, or mirror volumes, or accelerated. So there's a bunch of things that goes into creating the actual solution that is fit for you, but it is all listed in the catalog for the most part.
I think, Samir, we are good. Let's call for a wrap up.
Awesome. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Thank you,
It was a
everyone.
really good
Thank you
experience.
so much. Thank you, Samir. Thank you so much for a wonderful session. Hope everyone loved it. Please feel free to reach out to Samir on his LinkedIn. Would like to post your LinkedIn in the comment.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so we have a question. Okay, so Santosh is asking a question. In which scenario where Azure Arc is critical and does not support Azure services?
Where Azure Arc is critical and does not support Azure services. So to use Azure Arc, you obviously have to be connected with Azure, because there are some services which need continuous, or at least near continuous connection with Azure. The best example is log analytics, Azure Monitor, for example, right? So if you've got some things being sent to the Azure public workspace, then you need that connection for that data to go and sit in the Azure workspace, right? So that is where you need a near continuous connection. But having said that, Azure Stack HCI can work without constantly being connected to Azure, right? So it has to connect at least once in 30 days, because you saw in the slide there, right? So there is the licensing model is they bill you per month. So Microsoft has to know what your consumption was in the past month. So it has to connect to Azure once every 30 days. That if that is fine by you, you can go. There will be some services do actually, you don't need continuous connections, you need intermittent connection also works, but that depends on the criticality of workloads, or your budgets, or your connectivity, your compliance, and so on. If Azure Arc is installed and it is connected, it will always work. It is not like you cannot, even if you have Azure, you cannot pull anything. That usually doesn't happen unless there is some problem. But if it is Azure Arc is connected, then all the data services will also be available. And this is an organization personal question, I guess, whether to use Azure Arc or not. Again, like I said, you can also create a Windows cluster on Azure Stack HCI on the same hardware, which is entirely disconnected from the internet. So if your workload does not need internet, or if your organization has had private data that it cannot send to internet, then that is absolutely fine as well, right? So you don't have to compulsorily. You saw, if you remember in the wizard, that when we created the cluster, it had an option where whether you want to choose, whether you want to enable Azure Arc integration, enable or disable, right? There were two options. So it works with both options. It depends. It's a very private question. It depends on each organization's requirement. Cool. Great question. Anything else?
We are good.
Awesome.
I think time to call for a wrap.
Sure.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Bye. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.